I'm joined by two students. Will, would you like to introduce yourself just because you're first on my screen?
Okay. Hi, I'm Will. I'm a second year English literature student, and I'm also a student ambassador for the department as well, so I can answer any questions you've got.
Thank you very much. Jo, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Jo. I'm also a second year, but I study art and creative writing, and I'm a student ambassador for creative writing. So.
Thank you so much. And we've also got Dr. Chloe Houston joining us today. Chloe, if you wouldn't mind coming onto mic and introducing yourself.
Sure, thank you, Katie. Hello, everyone. My name's Chloe, and I am the admissions tutor for the Department of English Literature, which covers English literature programmes and creative writing ones too.
Yeah, so Chloe looks over a lot of personal statements and talks to people right from when they're thinking about applying all the way through until they start on our courses with us. So has a huge wealth of experience to give to you today. And today we'll be doing just that. We'll be talking about our experiences, giving you the top tips and answering your questions, both on creative writing and on English literature. So I will in a minute hand over to Chloe to kick us off, but I wanted to give you an idea of what it is that we'll be covering today. So we have split today into two parts. The first part will be looking at applying to university, so personal statements, what does an admissions tutor, so what does Chloe look for when she's reading them? We'll hear from Will about his experience and some tips about applying and writing personal statements. I'll chat you through a timeline on what it looks like after you've actually applied through UCAS to one of our courses. Then we'll hand over to you. You can ask any questions that you have at that point about applying. And then we'll look at studying our degree courses at Reading. So what our courses are, what our typical modules are on those courses, what you can expect as part of studying with us at the University of Reading. And then we'll hear from Jo, who's going to talk to you about what it's like talking about creative writing. We know that a lot of you won't have done that at school. It's not a very frequently offered subject. So it'll be interesting to hear about her experience. And then again, we'll open up for another Q&A session on there. Now, just before I hand over to Chloe, I thought it would be really useful for us to just gauge where you are in your processes about thinking about university. So I'm just going to launch a poll. If you just click on the answer that applies to you, that would be really helpful. It will help us know exactly what to do. So hopefully that poll's showing to you. And we want to know, have you applied to university? So yes, no, but you're thinking about applying and you want to start this coming September, or no, but you're thinking about applying in September 2024, which seems like a long time away, I know, but I know it will come round to you. So it'll be interesting to see on there. Right, okay, wow, thank you very much for answering that question already. I can see that you've already done it. So we had 33% of you saying yes, you've already applied. 50% of you saying no, but you're thinking about applying to start with us this September. And 17% saying no, but you're thinking about applying in September 2024. So thank you so much for showing us that. That's really useful. I'm just going to make sure that my PowerPoint is still showing, and then we will click on from there. So is that still showing my PowerPoint, Will? Can you still see it?
Yeah.
Great, okay then. So I'm going to hand over to Chloe now to talk to you from an admissions tutor's perspective on what it is that she looks for and some top tips about writing personal statements and applying. So Chloe, over to you.
Thanks so much, Katie. Well, the first thing I would say is that it's true, certainly, that the personal statement is an important part of your application, that we'll pay attention to it and we'll read it. And it's a really good opportunity for us to get to hear your voice in your application. So it's definitely important to us, and we really value the time that you spend in preparing your personal statement. But I'd also want to reassure you that a personal statement is, I think, sometimes given such a huge weight, you know, as though there's kind of like a magic key or a magic phrase you can use, or certain words you must use, certain words you mustn't use. And I would want to reassure you on that front and say not to worry about that, that really, you know, as Katie mentioned, I read loads of personal statements of all different sorts. I'm just looking for a bit more information about you and what interests you and things that are relevant to your degree program. So please don't feel like, you know, there is a magic formula out there or a perfect personal statement, and if you don't create it, you won't have a successful application, because there are lots of ways of writing a good personal statement. That's the first thing I'd say. So the first thing that we've put on the slide here is that we want to hear about your adventures in reading. We want to know what texts you've read, especially ones that are not on the curriculum, and why you've chosen to read them. If you're applying for a degree in English literature or creative writing, then it really helps if you enjoy reading. You don't have to have read very, very widely, but it helps to be curious and a bit adventurous in what you're reading. So if you've read something that interests you, tell us about it, tell us why, tell us what you enjoy and what it is that appeals to you about those sorts of texts. And if you're stuck for ideas, then you could always choose something that's related to something you're reading on your curriculum. So it could be another book by the same author, for example, or, you know, you might have read some science fiction and really enjoyed it and try another science fiction novel, something like that. So just see what's out there. And try and show us what interests you, because that helps us see your enthusiasm for reading and for your subject. Another good way to do that is to tell us what the study and analysis of texts on or off the curriculum has taught you. So what have you learned from what you've read? And that hasn't got to be, you know, a thought through set of lessons or experiences. It could simply be about the kind of insight that you've gained, for example, into another culture or another national perspective or a different identity from your own. Or it could be about, you know, having learned about a particular period of history or really got to grips with something that you found difficult before. Anything of that sort is helpful, because all of these things are about kind of showing us what people often tell us in personal statements. And people often tell us in personal statements, I am passionate about English literature, or I really love creative writing. And that's fantastic, because, you know, we are too. But what we want you to do is less of the telling, if you like, and a bit more of the showing. And the way that you can show it is by talking about what you've read. So you can also tell us a bit about what it is that you've developed in terms of your skills and experience that make you ready for studying literature English at university, sorry. So for example, that might be independence. You know, English literature students and creative writing students, you have to be fairly independent in their approach to their studies, and that's a skill that we both value in our applicants and certainly will help you develop while you're with us. So tell us about the kind of skills that you think you're already developing that make you a good student of English literature or creative writing, even though of course you don't have to have perfected those by any means. But if you think that you're already preparing for studies, then tell us how. We'd love to hear about it. Could I have the next slide, Katie, please? Thank you so much. So another good, a great way of showing us what you're enthusiastic about is to tell us what you're looking forward to when it comes to studying literature at university. And again, that might be about following up on a particular area or period or genre of writing that you've already enjoyed. So, you know, if you really enjoyed reading a book like 1984, for example, for your A-levels, then you might certainly be interested in reading other dystopian fiction, or maybe in branching out into science fiction, or in reading you know, other novels about totalitarian states. So that might be one example of that. Or it might be perhaps that you had a chance to read some Victorian poetry for your A-level, or just out of interest, and you'd like to follow that up a bit more. And this is also a good way actually of thinking about the kind of university course that will suit you best, because you can check online to see that that course and that institution offers the kinds of areas that you're interested in studying. It doesn't matter if, you know, you don't have to come to university or apply to university with an absolute passion that you definitely know you want to follow. You know, no one is going to hold you to anything that you say in your personal statement further down the line. So don't worry if you actually, you know, don't have a particular area of a particular program that you want to study, but try to speak with general enthusiasm about some specific area. And the final thing just to bear in mind is that your personal statement does show us your writing skills. It shows us what you're like as a writer. So, you try and make it sound like you. And by that I mean, you know, don't follow a format too closely. If you're given ideas in your school or sixth form college about how to write, that's fantastic. Those can be very helpful, but don't feel like you have to slavishly reproduce a template, or that if you don't do that, you won't be successful. We want to hear your voice and your style of writing. And you are also showing us your capacity to produce work that's well presented. So do make sure that you proofread your personal statement, that you try and correct any errors that are in it, because that's a good way of showing us that you take care with your work, which is of course something that we again like to see in our applicants, and something that will help you develop when you're here. Next slide, please, Katie. Thank you. Okay, so you'll often hear talk about transferable skills, and transferable skills are of course skills that, you know, kind of go across from one particular area of study or experience to another. And it's helpful to think about the kinds of transferable skills that we're looking for within your application when you're applying to university. And of course, this and everything that I'm saying today really applies to any application, not just to the University of Reading, but generally speaking for personal statements for other applications too. So the first thing is we're looking for skills of critical analysis, which really just means being interested in thinking about text and what you're reading, and the way that they work and how they do what they do and what it is that they do, and the kinds of ways they make us feel or think, and being prepared to spend some time thinking about those ideas. And putting together arguments. So, you know, if you want to show your view on something or your particular opinion, that can be one way of doing that. Transferable skills also include, or the transferable skills we're looking for also include strong written and verbal communication skills. So this is your chance to show us that you can communicate well in writing, you can communicate clearly and construct your sentences correctly and all that sort of thing. So do take time with that if you can. Your ability to manage your own time and learning, and often by the time you get to the end of school or sixth form, college or other studies, you really are an expert at time management, and you're very well prepared for the kind of independence that you will have at university. But there are lots of ways of showing us that you are able to manage your own time and learning, and emphasising those skills of independence in that respect. There are also lots of ways of showing us your research skills. So if there's something that you've investigated or found out more about, or that you're interested in, and that could apply not just to your academic studies, but of course also to hobbies or other interests, whether it be history or a language, or, you know, you're really interested in a different subject that maybe relates to English, something like psychology, you know, you can show us that and show us your enthusiasm for that, and that's also relevant to your application. And of course, research skills also apply to work that you might be doing for creative writing or English literature, and we'd love to hear more about what you've found out more about to do with your studies. And finally, you know, we're looking for creativity, and that is a hard thing, whether you're applying for creative writing or for English literature. It's a hard thing to show, especially within the confines of a personal statement. We do appreciate that. So please don't feel, as I said at the beginning, like you have to, you know, completely rewrite the form or produce the most original, most sparkling, most surprising personal statement anyone's ever read. But, you know, show us a bit of your voice. And if you're interested in particularly applying for creative writing courses, then it does help to make some reference to creative skills that you might already have developed. So whether that means you've already begun your own creative writing, or whether you've written in some other sorts of formats, or whether you're particularly interested in a particular genre of creative writing, you love poetry particularly, or, you know, you've become interested in reading short stories and perhaps you're trying to write your own short story. If you're interested in a creative program, then do please include some sort of information like that, because it really helps us. You don't have to be an experienced creative writer to study creative writing at university, not at all. But if you're curious about it, then that really helps. So show us your creativity. Thank you. So I'm now going to hand over to one of our students, Will, who's going to talk to you a little bit from his perspective about this whole process. Thank you, Will.
Hi, thank you, Chloe. Okay, so I'm a year 2 student, as I said at the beginning, at the university now. It feels like quite a while ago since I applied. But I think the most important thing I would say about the personal statement is don't get too wound up over it. As long as you spend time on it, make sure that, you know, you've shown a keen interest in applying to the university. and also make sure that it shows you. You know, it shouldn't be something that's robotic or too formal, because it can be quite tempting to try and make a document that just feels, you know, like a legal document almost, just to try and impress. But that's not really what the university are looking for. We're looking for you know, just to show that you've got transferable skills. So if you've done any part-time work, what sort of hobbies you've been involved in, you know, all of this will be really useful for when you come to apply to the university. And like Chloe was saying as well, if you make sure that anything you've done outside of the study that would be useful for the study, make sure you talk about that as well. So if you've read anything outside of an author that you were studying at A level, maybe some critical reading or a journal article, just to show that you've gone that extra mile, because at the end of the day, it's important at university, where you'll be studying mostly independently, and a lot of your time will be trying to figure out, what do I need to look into? What sort of things do I need to research? And also, I'm going to talk a bit about applying and what you might be looking for when it comes to university. So for me, it was difficult because I live in Birmingham, which is about 3 hours on train from here. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect when I came here. I did come here on an open day, but that was just before COVID, so I couldn't really remember the area. But anyway, the area is really nice. I think, yes, it's you know, it's a busy area, but there's also lots of nice places to walk. So if you're like me and you're more of a quieter student, that's definitely accommodating for that. There's tons of societies you can join in. The town centre is very nice. The accommodation as well. A lot of people will go into their own, will join up with friends and go into their own house or flat in second year. I've personally stayed in halls because I find that the halls are really nice at the university and they provide everything you need, especially at the moment with the costs so high as they are. The halls, I think, are a really good option. But I think it's a really accommodating university, and it's definitely made me feel very welcome. So if you've got any questions, just let me know at the end.
Thanks so much, Phil. That was super helpful.
You're welcome.
One question that often student ambassadors get asked on open days is, what's the process of narrowing down? You apply to 5 universities on UCAS. You might get all offers. If you do brilliant, you might not be made offers at all of them. But I think it'd be interesting to hear how you narrowed down your choices. Was it a case of doing extra research? Was it a case of trying to get onto campus as much as you could during the pandemic, but hopefully now there's more options available, and trying to get that feeling of the university? What did you do to narrow down your choices after you had applied?
Yeah, for me, I'd looked into Reading University beforehand because I'd actually heard of it, and then I went to the open day and I really liked the campus. I went to one other open day as well, which was Bristol University, which I wasn't so keen on, but I already had a good idea beforehand. But I would definitely say, don't rush into making an application. You know, make sure you've narrowed down your options. If you decide, actually, I want to be closer to home, be it, you know, if you live in Reading, you might want to apply to Reading, or if you want to go further out, it's all about what works best for you, really. But you know, I found the campus is really nice, and it just felt like a very welcoming environment to be in.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll get
You're
some more
welcome.
questions that are directed
Yeah.
to you after my slide next. But what I wanted to do was chat to people. We often get questions about what happens after you apply, and I know quite a good number of you who have joined us have applied. So the UCAS deadline for this year is the 25th of January. Let's say that you apply and you receive an offer from the University of Reading, which is brilliant, great news. What happens after that? So at the University of Reading, we run what's called visit days, and that is a chance for you to come onto campus, you book your place, and you get to meet your department or your 2 departments if you're doing joint honours. They tend to be on Saturdays, and it gives you a chance to experience life as a current student. So what actually is it like in a lecture if you've got a taster session? What is it like at lunchtime? Where do you eat? What do the halls look like? So it really gives you a chance to have a look at the university in more detail and asks students and lecturers lots of questions, and they tend to run from February until very early April. Throughout the whole process, we really do like you to keep in touch with us as much as you can. And there's two great ways to do that. If you've already applied, you would have already been invited to our Me at Reading applicant portal. Now that's a website especially for you who have had an offer, and we put in up content, videos by current students, articles written by students and tutors in our departments, so you can gain more of an insight and an idea about what it's like. And you can also use the links on there to chat virtually to a current student. And then we also have our departmental email address, so englishlit-admissions@reading.ac.uk. That goes direct to Chloe, and she'll be very happy, I'm sure she'll say this later as well, to answer any questions that you have, or if you have any concerns about anything, just drop us a line, and I'm sure Chloe will be very happy to talk to you. As you know, A-level results days tends to be in August. Not everyone applies with A-levels. We do take lots of different results on there, but usually your place is confirmed in August if you've made the grades. And we often get asked what happens if I don't make my grades. Now, Chloe, I'm not sure if you wanted to come onto mic and chat about what happens if someone doesn't come on. You might read their personal statement, or you might be in touch with them. What happens if someone doesn't make their grades?
Well, if someone doesn't make their grades, the first important thing to do is not to worry too much from the applicant's perspective, because we do look at the applications of students who don't quite make their grades on results day. And if you've dropped a grade and you've put Reading as your first choice, then you'd already automatically be guaranteed to get through anyway. So that's something to bear in mind. But we would then look at your personal statement, we'd look at your application, and we'd make a decision based upon your whole profile. So please do stay in touch with us if on results day you find that things aren't quite what you expected. Because if you really want to be at the University of Reading to study English literature or creative writing, then we very much want to have you. We want to make that possible. So we will certainly look at your application, and it's a really important part of the process that those are all considered individually at that stage. So do stay in touch with us, and don't give up hope, but make sure that you communicate with us as quickly and fully as possible after results day if that happens.
Thank you, Chloe. That's so helpful, and it's really reassuring to know that comeback time, we really do treat everyone as an individual, and we're looking at your profile holistically. It's also worth mentioning as well that in English literature, we run a foundation programme, and if you have dropped considerably, we will automatically, if you're suitable for it, offer you a place on the foundation year. So that's an extra year just to get you up to speed so that you can start the first year after that as you had originally intended. So it's a nice full safe method as well to know that we could, if you fit that profile, make you an offer on there if you were still interested. And then what happens before you enroll? Well, we run quite a lot of support before you come to us. We'll be in contact with emails before you start with us. You're obviously probably all important of looking forward to Freshers Week, or as we call it at Reading, Welcome Week. But we really help you in terms of reading lists on what you need to prepare, what you might want to buy before you get here. It's really not extensive, and you will find out exactly what it is that you might be needing to do to prepare before you start. I recognise that's a long way off, so just know that you'll be in safe hands, and we'll be in communication with you all the way through your journey, so you really do not need to worry about applying. So I'm going to hand it over to you then and ask you if you've got any questions that you want to ask us about applying, if there's anything we can possibly help with. We did have a question actually come in, Chloe, when you were talking, and I made a note of it, which is somebody's interested in applying for 5 different universities on UCAS, one of which contains creative writing, the others don't. What advice would you give to someone, because you write a personal statement, one personal statement for all 5 choices? What would you say? Would you say to them, consider, like, maybe just do a few sentences about creative writing? What advice would you give them?
Well, the first thing I would say is that creative writing is taught in many departments of English literature, or is frequently taught within English literature departments where it is taught, and that's because the two subjects sit together very well. So having an interest in creative writing and producing your own creative work, for example, is something that will, you know, look good on your personal statement if you're applying for English literature or creative writing. So there's no reason why you shouldn't include a bit of information about your creative practice as part of an English literature personal statement if that applies to you. So I certainly wouldn't worry if I were looking at a personal statement for someone who's applying for English literature, if they mentioned an interest in creative writing, I think, well, fantastic, wonderful. It's not going to put me off making them an offer for that degree program. So I would encourage you to mention your interest in creative writing, but perhaps, as you're suggesting, Katie, not to allow it to dominate entirely. We want to make sure that, you know, if the majority of your courses are primarily, say, English literature or a different subject, that you're showing that as being, you know, your primary interest. But by all means mention it. And the same thing applies, you know, if you're applying for joint honours subjects. It may be that those are slightly different at different institutions because everyone offers slightly different sorts of programs. But unless you entirely ignore the subject that you're applying for, whether that's English literature or something else, it's really not a problem to have an enthusiasm for another subject. I mean, as someone who teaches, I teach the literature of the early modern period, so that's the 16th and 17th century. And if I read on someone's personal statement that they're fascinated by history, that's not a negative mark against their name as far as I'm concerned. That's fantastic. Love to hear it. So, you know, most subjects are less separated from one another than it seems within the UCAS system. And when you get to university, you'll see that many people who teach in English literature departments are really interested in creative writing or in history or psychology or French, you know, whatever it may be. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Just show us your enthusiasms.
Thank you. Actually, Joe, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind just talking about how you balanced it, because you're doing joint honours, you're doing art and creative writing. I know I'm asking you to cast your mind back to the one you wrote all that years ago, but do you remember, did you divide it up 50-50?
Yeah, I remember when I did my personal statement, because I was doing art for majority of my applications, and this was the only one that was art and creative writing. So, but because my art practice is quite intertwined with my creative writing and my use of words, I just sort of talked about that as well. Yeah, but I think just balancing it of I did primarily focus on art, but then still talking about writing and how it influences each other, I think is still important. Because every subject, like you said, every subject sort of influences each other, and works together and interacts in some way. So yeah.
Of course, yes. And we do recognise that you may have not had the opportunity to explore a subject before getting to university, and so therefore, of course, perhaps you won't have as much to say, and creative writing often is one of those that you may not have been exposed to before. So I think, yeah, what you said there, combining things, trying to get a good balance, is all really good and useful. Thank you so much. And just one other very quick question which came in, which is, should I mention my EPQ? Chloe, do you love to see mentions of EPQs?
Yes, absolutely. I do mention it. I mean, I think anything that you've done like that, and an EPQ is a fantastic piece of work to have undertaken. Anything that you've done like that is absolutely worth mentioning, because it really does show initiative, independence, capacity for time management, as well as enthusiasm for your subject. So it really ticks lots of boxes. It's, you know, don't worry if you haven't done those sorts of things. There's still lots of ways of showing those skills and interests. But if you've got an EPQ, then yes, we'd love to hear about it. Tell us more.
Yes, and even better actually, if you, depending on what you apply to at the University of Reading, often we may drop one grade guaranteed if you get a B or above in your EPQ, as long as we haven't asked for a specific subject grading. So as long as we haven't said you have to get a B or an A in this subject, we may allow you to drop one grade if you've got a B or higher in your EPQ. But you can check if you haven't yet applied on our website. It's called "What Offer Will I Get to University of Reading?" If you were to Google that, that will explain all of those sort of drop one grades, all of those areas. So do check that out before you have applied if you haven't already. Okay, brilliant. Let's go on to our second part then, which is looking at studying English literature in more detail, and then we'll look at studying creative writing in more detail. So again, Chloe, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Katie. Well, we're obviously limited a little bit on time today, so I won't be going into huge amounts of detail here, but I'd love to hear more from anyone who's got questions. And of course, you can find out more about our teaching and our approach to English literature at Reading online via our website. The first thing to note is that our teaching is inspired by our research expertise. We're very fortunate in our department to have quite a high staff to student ratio. We have quite a wide range of academic staff, and each of those people is an expert in their own particular field. And that means that we're able to offer a wide range of research specialisms, and we all teach quite broadly within our own areas of interest. So research is something that feeds directly into our teaching, and it means that you're working with people who are right at the cutting edge of the field in which they work, and your teaching is completely up to date and comprehensive in that sense, which I think is really valuable. One of the things that really characterises us at the University of Reading in our department is that we really value creating a supportive and comfortable and safe environment for our students to work in. And one of the ways that we do that is by teaching face-to-face in small groups of students. So your seminar groups at Reading will typically be no more than about 15 students, and that can compare to much larger groups at some other institutions, might be 30 or 40 students sometimes. But the reason that we keep those groups small is because we think it's really valuable for students to be able to talk easily to each other. So when you're in a seminar group, you'll usually be in that same group the whole term with the same person leading your seminar and the same students in the group. And it means that you get to know each other and you can have interesting discussions and conversations without feeling too intimidated that you have to talk in front of a large group, for instance. And another way that we try and really offer that level of support to our students is through one-to-one teaching. So both from the people who are teaching your courses that you're taking, your modules, through essay support, and also through individual tutorials with your academic tutor, who's a really important person during your degree. Your academic tutor is the same person throughout the 3 years of your programme, and they are a sort of mentor and guide figure, but they're also first port of call when you need help with anything, whether that's essay writing or dealing with accommodation problems or anything else. So they're a really good person to have on your team of support while you're at Reading. So in your first year, if you're studying an English literature programme, you will take 3 of our core modules, and the core modules are the ones that we think are necessary for building the skills and experience that you need in order to succeed in any area of English literature studies afterwards. You can also take a range of optional modules, both in English literature and in other subjects, and some of our optional modules that are currently available are shown on the slide there. If you are a creative writing student, then you would take creative writing as part, the Introduction to Creative Writing course, as part of your core module suite. But that module is also available to students who don't study creative writing as part of their degree programme. So if you're just applying for English literature, you can still study creative writing at Reading. Our students can also have the opportunity to take modules from outside the department. For some students, that's an opportunity to continue a subject they've enjoyed at A-level. So it might be, take a history module or a module in politics. And for other students, it's a chance to pick up something new. So that could be a language or a philosophy module, maybe, if you didn't have the chance to do that at A-level. So it's a really great opportunity to diversify. And of course, for joint honours students, you would take core modules with us and core modules with your other subject, but you usually would still have some optionality, so you still get some choice about extra modules too. So there is a wide range of modules to choose from at Reading, and we really, one of the things we really value about our curriculum is that it's very diverse and it's very broad and comprehensive. So that means that not only do we teach a very broad range of modules chronologically across a broad range of historical periods, so right from Old English literature and the medieval period up to the present day, but it also means that we teach a wide variety of different subjects, whether that be English literature from different countries or from different backgrounds or different approaches. It's a very diverse curriculum. That means that there's lots of choice, but you do have help choosing and selecting your modules. So your academic tutor, again, is your first port of call there, and they're the person who can really help you to make the right choices and follow the sorts of things that interest you. None of our modules are examined by one final exam. Most of our modules are examined through a combination of coursework essays and other forms of assessment. So while we do use some exams, those are now take-home exams. They're not, sitting in an exam hall type exams. And we don't rely on exams as a single form of assessment anywhere across our programs. So you can see here some popular modules that we're running at the moment beyond our first year, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg. So do please go and have a look online at some of the other options available. If you look under structure, under the how we teach section, you can see that. On the left-hand side of the slide here, you've got some second year options, and as you can see, these tend to be sort of broader topics or some author-based topics, which our students can put in combination with each other. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, we've got some third-year options, and typically we're offering, perhaps 30 third-year modules a year. So that, again, this is just a few, but you can see a few of the most popular ones here. Reading has a particular specialism in children's literature. We have the Centre for International Research into Children's Literature at Reading, and we have the first MA programme in Britain in children's literature here. So we've got real expertise there. And you can see some of the other subjects that our students are enjoying at the moment there. And again, some of those will be author-based, like Margaret Atwood or Jane Austen, and some of them might be more to do with particular genre, like Holocaust testimony writing, or a recent module that we've been running, which is called #MeToo, Women's Writing as Resistance. So I'm now going to just briefly talk about studying creative writing at Reading before I hand over to Jo, one of our creative writing students, who can tell you a lot more about it. The first thing to note is that all of our staff who teach creative writing at Reading are themselves published and in many cases prize-winning authors. So whether it be in the field of novels or short stories or poetry or dramatic writing, they are people who have themselves, worked their way up through the industry and have tons of industry expertise in how to get published, how to write, and how to improve your own writing as part of a continual process of self-improvement. You can start creative writing from scratch in the first year, so you do not have to have studied creative writing before to do so at university, absolutely not. And you don't even really have to have done any creative writing before. That's why we call our first year course Introduction to Creative Writing. It really is an introduction. So it may be that you've got loads of experience, maybe you've had some work published even, which is fantastic. But if you haven't, don't worry. You really don't need that level of expertise to start studying the subject. So you can either choose to take a joint honours programme in creative writing, like art and creative writing, for example, or in combination with English literature or with film, theatre or television. Or you can choose simply to take creative writing modules when you're on the English literature programme. So you could take that introduction to creative writing in your first year, and then in subsequent years you could pick up other of our creative writing modules, such as ones in short story or in extended prose or poetry or whatever else. So lots of options there for involving creative writing in your programme. And you can also, in fact, take part in creative writing in a variety of other ways if you are interested in, for example, joining our online community of writing. So we have an online creative writing arts magazine called The Canvas, which is edited and organised by students in our department every year. And so there are lots of different ways of getting involved in creative writing at Reading that aren't just to do with teaching actually, but joining, for example, a writing society or other societies that are interested in writing. But creative writing at Reading, like the study of English literature at Reading, is really comprehensive. You have the opportunity to study all the major forms of literature, and many of our students find, some of our students who study creative writing do so because they want to go on to be writers themselves or creative writers themselves. But for others, it's more of an opportunity just to think about text in different ways. And, there's really nothing like no sort of way of thinking about a poem quite like trying to write a poem of your own. It's a really interesting way of approaching study, so it can be really useful just for your English literature studies. It's the final thing I'd like to mention just before moving on and asking Jo to talk to you a bit about her experience is that creative writing is taught slightly differently to English literature modules. So English literature modules will primarily be taught through an hour's seminar and then an hour's lecture each week, or a couple of hours seminars and a lecture, but primarily through those two formats. Whereas creative writing is taught primarily through workshop-based teaching. So again, working in small groups, workshopping work together, getting loads of feedback. It's really supportive and it's a really productive way of working too. But that's slightly different perhaps from what you might be used to for English literature. Okay, so I'm now going to hand on to Jo, who's going to tell you a bit more about what it's like to be a creative writing student at Reading. Thanks, Jo.
Hi, so I'm going to talk a bit about creative writing and doing a joint degree and my experience with that. So first of all, like doing a joint degree is there's a lot of balance, and the way it works is actually really helpful because the deadlines are usually quite staggered, and the classes sort of, they don't really clash with each other. It's like it's a good balance of workload. And being in a creative space in both areas of my degree has been really helpful for me personally. Like in creative writing, you have these workshops where you talk about the work that you produce with other people, and being in that space where you can really share and develop together is always really helpful, as well as like learning about different processes of writing and trying new things, like taking risks. It's a lot easier when you're in a safe sort of environment where you're all like working off of each other. And even in the short story module that I've just completed, there was a sort of even smaller group that we worked in outside of classes to like work on stories before we got to class and things like that. So yeah, it's a really nice like space to work with for the degree. And you do get lots of modules to choose from. This year, like I said, I've just finished the short story module. You could also do poetry and journalism. So there's lots to sort of look into, and the tutors are always really helpful with any module that you choose. And there's like this open communication, which I found really useful. Like I worked with Peter last year, who was a tutor who really like helped me with a lot of my work that I produced inside of class and outside, and it really opened up a lot of opportunities, like working with the Canvas, like Chloe mentioned, is a poetry magazine that also deals with art that I've been editing on, and working with the museum, that's the Museum of English Rural Life, that's available on campus. Yeah, and there's just like a lot of opportunities to work in creative spaces that are always advertised to you on the course, and yeah, and it's very supportive by like with other people that you work with and with the tutors. Yeah, so it's been really good, and there's a lot to learn from. There's a lot of different like theories you learn and processes, but then you're always encouraged to work on that in your own writing and how you can implement things that you've learned in a theoretical sense in a more practical sense. There's like a good balance of creativity and learning at the same time. So yeah, that's been my experience.
Jo, thank you so much. It's always so nice to actually hear from a current student all about their experiences as well. One question I'm going to head it off on before it's even asked, because we get asked it all the time, is joint honours double the work, or are you doing 50% of the work? What's your experience?
Yeah, so with art, they really work it out quite well, where you have a certain amount of hours that you spend in the studio if you are a joint honours student. And they do that with other courses as well, other joint courses. So you're never feeling really overwhelmed with one subject and you know, and there's always support, student support that's available if you are ever feeling overwhelmed. But yeah, the course really does try and interact with each other instead of saying doing two separate things.
That's really good. And it's also nice to know that you'll have an academic tutor who's based in one of those departments as well. And if you are overstressed or you're worried about a deadline, you can always go to them and they'll be able to support you.
Yeah.
Lovely. All right, so I'm going to open it up for our final round of questions on there as well. So if you've got any questions about creative writing or English literature, the modules, you want to ask a student about their experiences, it'd be really interesting to hear on them. I think one thing that we often get asked about is the examination methods, and I know Chloe covered that as well, about the fact that it's we don't examine through traditional exams in the way that you're sat in a big hall all together. But Chloe, is it possible to avoid exams altogether on the course?
Well, typically, Katie, in the first year, it's likely that you would be taking one or two modules that would involve an exam. So, for example, our core module, Poetry in English, uses an exam for a percentage of the credit, not for the whole module, but for part of it at the end of the year. But after your first year, and so certainly most of your modules in your first year will not be assessed by examination, or likely not to be. After your first year, it's pretty possible to avoid them mostly, I would say. I think that most students end up in their second year taking one or two modules that have an exam element. But certainly beyond that, in your third year, yes, you can avoid them altogether if that's your primary desire. Yeah, so that might mean you have to be flexible. But I would also say for students, I mean, I know some students like exams and some don't, you know, they really do divide people in terms of the sorts of things that you like. If you know that you hate exams or you are worried or anxious about them, I would just encourage you to bear in mind that university exams are a bit different as well to the exams that you've taken before. Excuse me. There's a bit more flexibility typically. We are, you know, usually a little bit less rigid in what we're looking for. So you may well find that actually your fears or concerns about exams, if you have them, are allayed a little bit by the fact that university is a bit different. And as I mentioned before, we give you lots of time to write an exam. So we're not expecting you to sit in an exam hall for 2 hours and then produce a handwritten exam anymore. I'm happy to say.
Thank you. I'm sure that will make some people feel a lot more confident as well. We've had a question in which says, and actually I think this would be great for both of our students to answer, one with an English literature example and one with a creative writing module. So Will and Joe, somebody's asked, may we have an example of an assignment you were given to get a sense of the kind of work we would be doing? So it'd be great if you could think of perhaps some from the first year of the course, a typical assignment. Will, you put your camera on first. Did you want to kick off? Oh, you're on mute. Let me.
Hello, sorry. Okay, so in the first year, I remember for some modules, it might be that at the end of the autumn term, you would get an assessed. Oh, first of all, you'd get a formative assignment before anything else, which is really just to show you how to do the assignment, and get feedback from it. And then
sorry,
after that,
so can I stop you there? Formative assignment might not be, everyone might not be know that. Formative assignment means what?
A formative assignment is essentially a practice essay. It's more about, you know, showing the skills, and it's more of an opportunity to learn. So you might be asked a question about a certain theme in a novel, like femininity, for example, and you'll have to write on that. And for a formative assignment, you will be graded, but the grade doesn't mean anything. Essentially, it's just used feedback, and then you take that to your summative assignment. So as I say, might be the end of autumn term. So I've got two assessments due in on Friday. Again, you'll either get an extract or you'll be given a question about a theme in the novel, and it's up to you essentially to do your own research, plan it through, but you'll always be given at least 3-4 weeks to get it all together, make sure you've got a good plan, and as long as you've done your research, you'll be absolutely fine.
Thank you so much. And Jo,
That's
could
okay.
we have an example for creative writing?
Yeah, so in the first year, it's obviously an introduction to creative writing. So you're given like prompts to work with. So I remember when we were doing a poetry module, we were given sort of a prompt of eco poetry or ekphrastic sonnets, and then we have to learn about that, go away, work on our own pieces and workshop them together. And then the assignment would sort of be to put it in a portfolio and like finalize a sort of piece. Yeah, but like Will said, with the formative, like you get feedback and you can work on it more for the next assignment, so it doesn't feel too final. Yeah.
That's lovely, thank you. I think we've got time for just one more question if I can squeeze it in. And Jo, you've made reference to this already, but the workshops, it's just come in. Are the workshops daunting? Your experience, I know that I've heard that you read out your poem or what you've written out loud and everyone comments on that. Is that scary?
At first I was really nervous, but honestly, like the first time I did it, I remember I was so shaky, and then because you're all sharing together and it's not just like you have to stand up and you're the only one performing, it's more of just like a sharing some words, and then you share your thoughts on each other's, and after spending a lot of time with the same workshop, like you do form really nice bonds, so it really doesn't feel daunting for very long. Yeah.
Like you just said, you're seeing your group outside of lecture time anyway, so you become friends and it's just sharing what you've written together and learning from each other, which can only be a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, let's end there for today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you do have any questions that you think of after today, do email us directly, so that's englishlit-admissions@reading.ac.uk. We'll be really happy to answer your questions. If you haven't already been able to visit us on campus, do get in touch. We're happy to arrange one-to-one talks with you. We've also got campus tours. It's very nearly fully booked, but the 15th of December does have some availability left. So if you just type in campus tours, Reading University, you'll find the link for that if you did want to come and visit us. We'd be very happy to meet you and chat to you one-to-one as well as part of that. So we'll end there today. Thank you so much for joining. After we end, it will pop up a survey. Please do fill it in if you can. It helps us improve sessions like this for next time. But take care, and we hope to see many of you in this September or the September afterwards. Thanks very much. Goodbye.